Welcome, Mr. Quickspot.
Oh, yeah. All right. All right.
I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Okay, so we are going to continue with our discussion of irregular verbs, or continue our discussion with verbs, and now we're going to talk about irregular verbs. This is part 2 of our verb discussion, and just like part 1, I kind of feel irregular verbs is also a very elemental subject, and we're not going to waste a whole lot of time on it. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it because, we have much more important things to involve ourselves in. Well, namely, okay, so let us continue here. Irregular verbs are those verbs that you just can't add like an ed at the end or something like that to make them, change their tense. These words you usually have to like spell differently. They're spelled differently, sometimes completely different than the original word. And for the most part, you just have to know these words. Now, back in the day, you were given a really long list by your elementary teacher of these irregular verbs that are ones that you should know, that you have to know in order to communicate on a daily basis with people, and that you have to know so when you're reading them you don't get confused. So you're familiar with all of these. I don't think there are any particular irregular verbs that we could go over that you wouldn't know about. So our objective here is not to go over the irregular verbs, but just to talk about the whole concept of irregular verbs. So we're just going to go over like 1 or 2 of these, and that's it. The rest of them you can deal with in SCORM activity. So we're going to do a little skipping here. Okay, let's take the irregular verb blow. Okay, so we can't just add an ed at the end of blow and have the past form of blow. The present, of course, I think is going to stay the same. But when you talk about the past, you can't say blowed. And when you talk about the past participle, you also can't just add something to the end. So we got to make a new word. And I know you already know what the new word is. So let me just go, okay, blow, blew, blown. Okay, all right, so you know that. So here are the irregular verbs. You know these maybe in class, in elementary, you saw a word and everybody yelled out what it is and all of that. Whatever technique that the teacher used to help you remember irregular verbs, he was trying to get you to do that for a reason, because that's just a list you just have to remember. So at any rate, so like I said, we're not going to go over them. We're just going to skip. Okay, there's a lot of them. Okay. Oh, we're back. All right, now irregular verb, of course, when you talk about trying to make it into a past or past participle, you have to do something else other than do what is normally done. For instance, the word build is going to become built, and in turn is going to become or say have built when you're talking about the past participle. And we're looking at a list of when you want to change, when you're only changing the consonants or adding a consonant, changing a consonant in order to make it into a past or past participle form of verb. Like for instance, lent becomes lent, lend becomes lent, becomes have lent. When you talk about changing vowels, here's a few examples of that. When you're changing the vowels in the word in order to make it into a past participle, talking about the irregular verbs here. Fight becomes fault, fault becomes fault, have fault. And rain becomes rain, and rung, which I actually see saying rang and rung and sang and sung is I see quite often on the SAT. So those definitely are 2 irregular verb forms that you got to know, because All right. So at any rate, and when you're talking about changing both the vowel and the consonant, you just come in with a whole different word. Bring becomes brought, and have brought, go, went, and gone. And so there are some irregular verbs that completely change their form, and then there are some irregular verbs that only change a letter, like a consonant or a vowel. So at any rate, we'll go back over that. We're not going to continue discussing this. I think that is pretty much enough for us to discuss. There are a tirade of, I do want to discuss this though, but there's a tirade of videos that you can, enjoy and view at your viewing pleasure on the site, going over these. There are some words that are a bit confusing because they actually have different meanings as well as being irregular verbs, like the verb lie and lay, because of course lie means to rest something and lay means to put something. So when you're talking about using them, you have to be very careful. Sit means to rest, set means to put, and rise means to go up, and raise means to lift. So, these are words that you definitely got to know and understand. Not only do they have some funny changing letters when you're talking about the past and past participle, but they also have a different meaning depending on how they're being used in the sentence. Okay, but we're not going to really go into that. Verb tense is what we want to talk about now. So there was the beautiful irregular verb. Okay. Verb tense. Now we're inching a little closer to where we need to be. Obviously, we need to know about verb tenses. And not only do we need to know about verb tenses, but we need to understand how their meanings change. And I'm not really going to go into it in too much detail, but this is why I have backup information there for you to go into into details for each one. But let's talk about verb tense and what it is, obviously. Now, verb tense is basically the indicator for when the action takes place. Basically, it expresses when the action takes place, whether something moved, when it moved, or it can express a state of being. A state of being. All right, so let's look at this. Let's look at the word rehearses. Let's look at the word rehearses. This is an action. Of course, this is present. The verb rehearses is present in its form, and it represents an action that is happening right now as we speak. But let's talk about when you start adding helping verbs. Like if we added the helping verb has to rehearsed, which is a slightly different form of rehearses. Now we're talking about making the tense or changing the meaning of the tense a little bit here. Now this is the action that happened sometime before now. We're not quite sure when it happened, but we know it happened. So if you want to indicate that something happened before right now, then you couldn't just say rehearses or rehearsed, especially when you're not really sure about when the action took place. You want to say, has rehearsed. Okay, rehearsed, straight up past, meaning that it happened in the past, and we pretty much have an idea of when it happened. We have an idea that it happened. Then we have had rehearsed, and that's an action that happened before another time in the past. So depending on how you're using it in the sentence, you want to indicate that, okay, this thing happened before this thing happened. Then you want to use had rehearsed. Future will rehearse, of course, that means that something that's going to happen. Something that is going to happen in the future. But when you want to indicate that this thing will happen before something else happens or before a specific time in the future, then you will say will have rehearsed. For instance, the band will have rehearsed before the first show. So that means that they're going to do this thing. They're going to rehearse, and they're going to do it before another time in the future, and that is the first show. So, in other words, they will be ready, or at least they will, have prepared before the first show. Okay, so I know I'm not really getting into serious detail here because of our, time restraints here. Present progressive, that's an action that is happening right now. It's happening. As we sit and watch it, it is happening. Mr. Quick is talking to you. I mean, to the camera, but I'm really talking to you. So that's something that's happening now. Well, now in my sense of now, well, kind of in your sense of now too. Interesting. Now we're going to talk about that. Present perfect. Progressive has been chasing. Now this is an action that happened sometime before now. Mr. Quick has been making videos. Yes. Well, I mean, that is going to be something that actually definitely happened before the time that you know is now. It's also happened before the time that I know is now. But we're not saying it has stopped, obviously, because maybe Mr. Quick, as you sit there, is still making videos. We don't know. So to indicate that, we're going to say, Mr. Quick has been making videos. So you're not saying he doesn't make them anymore. You're just saying that it's something that has been happening. Okay, before my now and your now. Okay, past progressive was chasing. Mr. Quick was making a video. Okay, so now we know definitely this is something that happened in the past. He was making a video. So that implies that he's not doing it now, or at least you're not. I mean, you're not absolutely sure, but you're kind of sure. You're pretty sure he's not doing it right now because he was making it. Had been chasing. I know I got chasing up here, and I'm saying usually, to tell you a funny story. Usually I use Tom and Jerry for these. When I made these, I had made them in mind with Tom and Jerry, and I would talk about Tom and Jerry and all that. But I'm using me now. How about that? Okay, is that okay? Had been making. This is action that happened before a specific time in the past. Okay, now before a specific time in the past, Mr. Quick had been making videos. Okay, before he started class. Okay, so that means that I was doing something before I started class. What was I doing? I was making videos. So I was making videos during the time or the period before class. So that means that this is an action that happened before a specific time in the past. Now, class started, an hour ago. So, but before that point of it starting, I was doing something before that point. I was making videos. See, I had been making videos. That's what I had done, entertaining myself in that period before class started. Okay, so I think you get the idea. Future progressive will be chasing. That's something that is going to be happening in the future. Not. You want to add more meaning, you write it, put it in a sentence if you want to know exactly when it'll be happening in the future. Okay, future perfect progressive will have been chasing, or in my case, will have been making. By 12 o'clock, Mr. Quick will have been making videos for 4 hours. So that gives you an indication of an action that will have happened before a specific time in the future. So 12 o'clock, before 12 o'clock, he would spend 4 hours doing the video. You get it? Will have been making videos for 4 hours by 12 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? Okay, okay. So that's how we use that. Okay, now when we use these tenses, I mean, you know, we're going to be definitely indicating and expressing different points of time. Time reference is what we're going to be doing, and this is really important when you're talking about the meaning you're trying to imply or put in a sentence. Now, this is directly related to what we're going to be doing towards the end of our discussion, which is shift in verb tense. Because when you have some actions happening in a sentence, obviously they have to happen at a specific time. Sometimes if you put them in the sentence wrong, or the times that they happen in the sentence wrong, you make your sentence a bit illogical, because obviously things can't happen. Things have to happen in a certain order for them to be logical, or they won't be logical to the person you're communicating with. Okay, so this, I'm just going over it in a different way here. You can take your time and go through the SCORM activity, but I don't want to go over it again because I just went over it again. And it's a little more detail here. There are also some additional videos actually, I wanted to do that last one, but that's okay. So here we go. Now we're going to apply what we know, try to put together what we've been talking about so far here. Okay, now here's a sentence here. Let's talk about it. Let's see if there's anything wrong with it from a verb standpoint. The survey indicated that both men and women liked ads more when the models are attractive. So I want you to look at that sentence and see if you see anything that's not quite wrong with it. Of course, we're talking about verbs, so you can kind of, you know, narrow down what you should be looking for. The survey indicated that both men and women liked the ads more when the models are attractive. Yes, if you notice that there was a problem with the verb tenses here, you notice correctly. We started out the sentence with indicated, which of course is simple past tense, and then we ended the sentence with are attracted. I mean, of course, we mentioned the verb like. Dear women liked the ad. So then we got past, and then we got present. Well, that's a problem, because if we got past and past, we need to change the last one to past, or we need to change the first two to present. And I think what we're going to do here is we're just going to change the last one to past. Now, this is going into the whole idea of shift in verb tense. This is an excellent example of shift in verb tense, where, you know, towards the end of our sentence. And of course, we're talking about a multi-clause sentence here. Whenever you're talking about shift in verb tense, we're always dealing with multiple clauses. This is why I like to have this discussion about verbs after we talk about phrases and clauses, because, you know, you really wouldn't be able to get the concept of the shift in verb tense if you hadn't already been introduced to the idea of more than one clause in a sentence, because every clause has its own subject-verb relationship. So when you have multiple clauses in a sentence, then you need to make sure the verbs are all in sync logically. Now, you can change the tense of verbs in a sentence, but there has to be a logical reason, why you're doing that. And of course, we get more into that when we talk about shift in verb tense. Let's look at another sentence. My psychology professor, Dr. Hayes, wanted his students to establish realistic goals that are not too hard. Here we have our subject, which is Dr. Hayes. He's doing something he wanted, okay? He wanted, so he has this state of being, of wanting something. And my Dr. Hayes wanted his students, wanted being past tense, to establish realistic goals that are. So, and of course, are being present tense. Now, read that to yourself for a second and tell me whether or not, ask yourself whether or not that is logical for the professor to have that desire in that way. Of course, all teachers and professors want students to achieve. That's not what I'm saying. at all? I'm looking at the whole tense thing here. Well, obviously one is past tense and are is present tense, and it just doesn't fit the way it is here in the sentence here. So we're going to have to definitely change that. And the way we would change that is we would say Dr. Hay wants his students to establish realistic goals that are not too hard. Wants and are is present tense, and this is how we should have it. There's someone knocking at my door, and I need to stop here. But I think this is really a good place to stop for our part 2, and we're going to pick back up with part 3, more of the same, more going into more detail about the tenses, and because that needs a lot more discussion. This is an Islamic school.
We'll talk about tomorrow.
That's rolling the hard way. We don't want to roll quite that hard. We want to get one of them little mini buses.
What's up?
No, and 14.
What's up?
Tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Everybody's gone out of their mind.
Welcome to Mr. Quick's class.
Welcome to Mr. Quick's class.
Welcome to Mr. Quick's class.
Welcome, Mr. Quick's class.
Oh, yeah. All right. All right.